We're back yet again to further discuss the story of the corrupt world inside the universe of horror known as Little Nightmares. When I talked about the first game, I mentioned that I hadn't yet played the sequel to the artistic masterpiece given to us afterward. Since then, I've had lots of time to play the second game, and I want to take back some of my criticism. I'm happy to report that this is a lot better than the first one. I can proudly say it is a true follow-up in terms of gameplay and story. The devs must have listened to the feedback they received for how disturbing their first entry was, because the amount of effort here is beyond impressive. The puzzles have more of an emphasis on stumping the player rather than frustrating them, and feel a lot more creative than last time around. Instead of the brave yellow canary from before, you play as a young boy named Mono, equipped with a paper bag on his head. Like I said with the first game, the atmosphere and environment are excellently detailed and feature a whole array of sights to get lost in. Your eyes could scan a single room for hours, and you'd still notice new details here and there. It still holds faithful to that Little Nightmares feel while introducing us to a bunch of new creepy elements. I feel like I still didn't do it enough justice. Fans should know what to expect when picking up the sequel, but I'd really like to break down even further details with this universe and explore the plot in a way that will help all of you realize just how genius and amazing these games can be. Without further ado, let's begin. As I mentioned previously, the woods are nothing more than a glimpse into the twisted reality we're stuck in. Isolated from civilization, Mono is on his own until he eventually meets another person once he makes his way into a seemingly empty cabin. Who is this? At first, I had no clue. I thought it was supposed to be Mono's brother or cousin or something, but the game keeps this vague for now. Together, the two of you can navigate the environment and solve puzzles using two brains instead of one. Often, this kid will help guide the player in confusing spots as to grant you a little leeway and not overload your brain receptors. Puzzles here are a lot more entertaining when you're not the only person solving them. The environmental specialty returns from the first game, offering very nerve-wracking and intense situations for Mono to get himself out of. If you thought the first entry was tough and tricked you a lot, just wait until you play the second one. The animation style remains true to what they've developed before, though it feels smoother, possibly thanks to a higher production quality. I find it hard to believe that more people don't talk about this series because it feels extremely unique. Throughout Little Nightmares 2, you have the ability of searching the environment for secrets. Instead of lost gnomes or lit candles and oil lamps, you can find hats that Mono is capable of wearing. Some are available in plain sight, while others are cleverly hidden in certain rooms. This is a neat detail, and I appreciate they added this for people who want to enjoy the base experience. This game introduces more thought-provoking puzzles, like using a stick to disable bear traps. Early on, we learn that this is an entirely different experience than what we're used to. I'd also like to mention how much darker this game is. You don't have a flip lighter and must instead persevere using your wit. Many antagonists you'll encounter in the game depend on audio cues rather than visual. Some of these monstrosities can actually be fought off at certain times. There's a mechanic implemented here where you can defend yourself, finding tools like sticks, hammers, or other things at certain scripted moments can prove useful for Mono when confronted by the nightmares in the world. You have to carefully swing the weapon at the correct time in most cases, but in others it's all about getting by. There's an axe in the basement of this house, and you need to use it in order to break down the wall and free that person that I mentioned earlier. We learn very quickly just how brutal the world is when we're introduced to the first threat of the game, the Hunter. Some old bastard must have gotten too drunk his whole life and began trapping both humans and animals in the woods. Unfortunately, you're on his shit list for a short while in this introduction. He chases after you and your friend endlessly. His powerful shotgun takes a little while to reload, but it devastates everything he aims at. There's a small segment where you have to run away as he shoots you, but you can't just dead sprint to the end. You have to carefully walk around his shots and move only when he reloads. For an introduction, I gotta say, it did a hell of a lot better job than the first game did, at least in terms of giving me anxiety like this. The scenery is there with all the bells and whistles of an atmospheric horror gem fit with crippling sights of decay or obvious nods to the gorier side of the world we're stuck in. I personally don't ever want to see a hammock of dead bodies hanging from a fucking tree. No thanks. I want to talk about Mono for a second. This boy wasn't mentioned anywhere in the first game's main story, or, I don't know if he was mentioned in the DLC from that game, as this was the first time I've ever seen or played as him. What I can gather from the intro alone is that he's a caring person who risks his own life in order to save others. Six was a great protagonist because she felt like a stranger in a strange land, but Mono is different. He's grown accustomed to this dark universe and knows all the tricks to avoiding danger, making him an unofficial martyr for hope. Whether or not it's true, as the player, I speculate it's due to his time spent running away from everything in this warped and depressing setting. This shadowed land that we inhabit isn't home, but we might as well pretend it is, because there's no getting out of here. The woods are definitely tricky with all the traps placed there. The hunter's not only a menace to the creatures here, but also to the crazy people that you'll encounter later on, because imagine if one of them were walking through these woods and stepped on a fucking bear trap. From an outsider's point of view, I'd be pretty pissed off. What kind of psychotic asshole randomly sets bear traps and nets through the woods? I suppose it's the same kind of asshole who would wield a double-barrel shotgun to kill mice. The hunter is way more ferocious than the janitor, but he isn't as smart. He can't see that well, allowing you to hide behind certain objects or tall grass as you pass by. If you walk out in front of his flashlight beam, you're dead meat. You have to time it perfectly before trying to move past him, and it's pretty exhilarating. It's a good thing this guy's a terrible shot, and I like how they never reveal his face. Instead, he wears some kind of Friday the 13th potato sack with an eye hole cut out. The heavy stomps from his boots are enough to send any headphone user into a state of panic. Just wait until he begins shooting at you. Suddenly, the game gets way more intense. Just like the first game, this is a cinematic masterpiece through and through. The set pieces are fantastic, offering intense moments like close calls and noise-oriented puzzles. The game itself is always telling a story in the background, while the characters take the focus in the foreground. I still praise their artistic style too. Little Nightmares was always meant to be this gothic, and contained a blue hue of tragedy consistently. The only tragedy I can think of is not being able to escape that hunter son of a bitch. And guess what? The finale to his encounter isn't just riveting, it's fucking crazy. Together, you and your friend will have to break into this locked room. Once inside, there's a shotgun that you both have to work together to aim and then rack. Once that's done, the hunter pops his thick sack-hooded head through the door. Just as he's about to claw his way inside, the two of you pull the fucking trigger. This was debatably more shocking than when Six pounced onto the gnome from the first game. Not even 30 minutes in, and we've drawn our first blood. Granted, it really was only a means of defending ourselves, but how far will it have to go before we can truly ever feel safe? Now there suddenly feels like a massive rain cloud has claimed Mono, forever altering the course of the story as we continue. There's still some hope. You can't hug gnomes, but you can hold the hand of your friend as little or as long as you'd want. This is not only wholesome, but reassuring. In the first game, Six was entirely on her own, and didn't have anyone to comfort her. When you're exploring the uninhabited city, there are plenty of jarring yet confusing sights to come across. First of all, there's no people, no lights, no sound, nothing. This place belongs to the rain and ghosts, nothing more. This short segment where you're exploring with your friend isn't useless. In fact, I think it's meant to portray just how much trust you need to give in order to get by in these dark times. Working together is the only way to get through, no questions asked. Many of the puzzles here are simplistic, but require your buddy's help. Thankfully, the AI in pathfinding is magnificent, and they usually don't give me a hard time, which made me feel like I was playing a legitimate online campaign with a friend. One of the secrets you can find that I mentioned earlier are these visions of children from the past. Just like part 1, these don't serve much purpose other than 100%ing the game. There aren't any enemies to worry about in the city itself, but eventually Mono accidentally wanders into a brand new hell that neither him nor his friend could prepare for. The hunter's echoing shots still ring in your ears. The air is silent but foggy and thick as Mono and his friend venture forth across the water to find a warped, melting city bent on a society that has long abandoned it. At first glance, the city is an intimidating place, grimly leaning over the water as if it's watching the player come closer, like a spider watching a fly come dangerously close to the web. After traversing the streets, like I mentioned just a second ago, you'll end up at the nursery. This is where things get interesting. Much like the woods, the nursery is riddled top to bottom with booby traps and countless unsafe pathways. Even if you know the trap is there, it's still tricky to avoid if you're a complete fucking moron like myself. Look, there's clearly a booby trap there. The wood piece is sticking up. Oh, doggummit. See what I mean? I knew this was gonna happen. Watch your step, your head, your back, every direction that is compromised in this chapter of the game. Running straight through will more than likely kill you. As you walk through the hollow halls of this forsaken place, you suddenly notice a bunch of strange child dolls watching you from a distance. Moving further ahead, they suddenly ambush Mono and his friend. Great, now I'm alone again. Nothing else we can do but move on, but you'll wish you hadn't the second you see the next threat in the nursery. The teacher is an unhealthy-looking, spaghetti-necked creature that'll keep you up at night. What with the pissing and shitting yourself and all. She's a fierce and interestingly putrid creature that must have come from the same sickness that claimed people's lives at one point. If she catches you in her line of sight or happens to hear you doing something, you might as well hit restart checkpoint. It's faster and a lot less scarier. She uses her long neck to grab Mono from a far distance. This is shitty because sometimes you'll think you got away during a chase only to witness her stretch herself to an impossible degree and bite you. It's an instant kill with the standard formula of restarting the puzzle from the get-go. Her face is hideous and off-putting. She's always smiling and she looks like a melted candle figurine. I thought the enemies in the first one were scary, but I like them here too. Often her tactic relies solely on sight. First, you'll be avoiding her gaze, but then you have to time your movements to the sound of her disturbing piano lessons. The only way to proceed is to move when the room isn't silent, and do it fast. If you fuck up here, it's all the way back to the beginning. It can be a bit tedious having to replay some of them, especially when you get frustrated and stuck, though I'll cover that later on. Compared to the previous, this game was pretty clever with its environmental mind tricks that you'll more than likely need to spend a minute on. Plus, it's nice to have a breath of fresh air when you're not being chased down by some unknown entity from hell. I struggled for quite some time while trying to escape the dreaded nursery, or school, or whatever the fuck it is. I'm just calling it that because it seemed cursed enough to be considered a nursery, but anyway. Each room gets harder than the last. At one point, you have to sneak right by her using the shade of these weird jars to conceal yourself. Then you gotta climb this staircase. Fuck, gotta do it fast or else... God damn it, I was right there. Ooh, I know, I'll throw this bottle. That'll get the dumb bitch away from me. Oh, what the hell? How did she know I was there behind that jar of pickled fucking croissants? It ain't easy being cheesy, but it's a great feeling once you get past that part in particular. Whew. Afterwards, you have to kill a few more dummy kids before you find your friend, who seems to be a bit tied up. Kill those fucking idiots, and then go save the only person you have left in this disgusting universe. Then it's right on to the piano puzzle I mentioned earlier. Kind of silly that she's playing the same song over and over but making slight adjustments to the piece. There's a long song that she plays and then a short one to try and trick you into making noise. Just time it as best you can and be patient. It's not a race unless someone's directly behind you. Once that's done, the teacher crams her fucking twisted head directly into the vents in a heinous and devious chase scene. Holy shit, my blood was practically popping out of my pores due to the goosebumps. I am really glad they went a little harder in terms of the scare factor. It's not easy to get away when you're spotted, and even though you slightly have a means of defending yourself, you're still heavily outnumbered and outwitted by everything else. Both of our heroes escape from the dreaded building and the clutches of the teacher. Together they wander into a room and... Wait, what's that, a blanket? Oh no, it looks like a coat. Okay. Wait, a yellow raincoat? That's right, Mono has been traveling with Six this whole time, the main protagonist of the first game. Had I known that, I wouldn't have left her behind so many damn times. So not only is this a prequel, but it's an entirely new narrative. The all-seeing eye is back yet again, placed thoroughly in the game's chapters to indicate that, much like before, you're being observed during the course of your journey. It's still unclear as to what person or thing that is, but they still lean into it with subtle nods in the environment like toy bricks or graffiti of the eye. This means that who or whatever has control of everything that's going on is clearly trying to create a dystopia of some sort at the cost of humanity being stripped of their livelihood and replaced with something hauntingly artificial and animalistic, and anything that stands against that must be stopped by any means necessary. But there are still so many other questions I have, and I don't want to get into them out of fear I'll sound stupid and get picked on, so let's just move on with the plot. Right after escaping the nursery, Mono and Six stumble into the abandoned hospital. This is the darkest chapter yet, both literally and figuratively. I can appreciate whoever was in charge of making the puzzles for this game. They must know what they're doing. Sure, some of the objectives revolve around key collection, but for Little Nightmares fans, it's gonna work absolute wonders. There's plenty of climbing, sliding, and even teleportation at one point. To the true sense of the word, this is a horror platformer fit with a mixed bag of emotions. You'll realize this when you see just what you're up against in this shadowed realm of agony. Yeah, now all of a sudden there's mannequins. Just when you start to think it can't get worse, someone always comes back and throws a fucking wrench at your head. The wrench in question today are the mannequins, who only come after you when you're not shining a flashlight on them. I'm not gonna lie, when I first played this segment, I was stuck for an hour and gave up. Aiming the light at the correct time is the key to getting by, but it gets so much harder with more dummies surrounding you at all times. You never know which ones are gonna move and which ones will stay still. If you give it your all and pay very close attention, you can do it. It just takes a lot of trial and error, which is similar to how the series has often approached its gameplay in the past. It's all about finding the curveball while it's in midair. That's a shitty baseball metaphor, so you're welcome for that. Soon enough, you're fighting off two hands of a dummy. They crawl after you at a fast pace like spiders and often fake you out so that when your guard is down, they have a window to lunge at your face. Once again, it's all about timing, and then it's on to the next big thread of our story. The doctor is a large-bodied insect-like man that crawls on the ceiling of the ward. Dangling his sausage arms from time to time, it appears he has been disassembling dummies and humans to combine the two into various working hybrid parts. Why? Crawling underneath the beds and through the ventilations is an extremely anxious situation to put the player in. I loved every second of the hospital and felt that it was a bit too short. But why is he hacking up human bodies? It doesn't take long for us to get the answer. Near the end of this segment, you'll enter a room with a curtain and an IV bag set up. In the silhouette from the bed's lighting, we see a very clearly alive person. I suppose this is the doctor's wife, but that means he's been using these disgusting concoctions to try and build something to replace parts of her? Or keep her alive, perhaps? Either way, that's foul and bone-chilling. It's something that quite literally made my stomach turn upside down upon discovering. What an excellent narrative for a brilliantly done horror game. To add salt to the wound, we have to turn off her fucking life support in order to escape from the doctor. Jesus. Then you have to climb the morgue shelves and retrieve the fuse. Then it's time to run for your goddamn life. The doctor gives chase until you reach an incinerator. Consumed with rage, he crawls in after you. You have to crawl through the dirt and make your way to the other side, tugging the latch to break it. Once you're through, Six closes the door. Mono runs over to the switch and cooks that motherfucker. almost a disturbingly wholesome way, Six warms her hands by the newly cast fire. I stood in awe for a minute and felt speechless. It's a shame I waited so long to review this. Then, after all that crazy shit, it's a small venture into the Pale City where our last threat remains. There's a tricky elevator puzzle that involves some backtracking and timed jumps, then more team efforts between our heroes to guide each other out of harm's way. In the distance, there's a massive tower with a light on the top. After this, you'll have to get through another television hack when suddenly, a tall, thin man begins to chase after both of you. He's not as scary as the other creatures we've encountered, but he's menacing enough with his ability to slow down time. And what's worse is, he takes Six away from us. I never thought I'd feel a deep pit of guilt and remorse in my gut as I did when playing this game and seeing this moment unveil. It's devastating that Mono is incapable of saving her right then, but it's not too late. Before you confront that slender-looking bastard, you'll have to solve a series of puzzles involving these TV screens that Mono can pass through. This is the teleportation that I mentioned earlier. They serve as a teleporter, often needing to be turned on in order to work, obviously. That's what the remote control is for. You'll have to lure the faceless people away from the screens as they seem to be addicted to the static, as if something is speaking to them through it. They break into the television store at the end of that segment and bombard the furniture like a herd of fucking cows. Well, you're confronted once again by the tall man after that. You'll have to resist his presence as he twists and turns around you. It's a distorted moment that I was certain would lead to the safety of my friend, but it unfortunately didn't work. The tall man disappears after taking too many hits, and suddenly you're in a completely different dimension. This is quite possibly the hardest part of the game, and it's all because of the puzzle just before the cinematic end boss. You have to navigate these series of pink ethereal doors. You'll know if you're near the right one by its audio cues. Still, I struggled for 30 minutes trying to find the correct path forward. The way this last puzzle works is you have to go through the correct doors in corresponding order, so this makes for a tough time for slow-brained morons such as myself. But now it's time to discuss the endgame because it's not at all what I was expecting, and I'm sure if you're like me and haven't played this yet, your jaw is going to drop too. This is Six. She's been corrupted by whatever the fuck and seems to be in possession of a small musical box that is controlling something. I felt mixed emotions here. Six is a wonderful character, so witnessing her in this twisted state with her elongated limbs felt unreal and wrong. As Mono, we only have one choice: destroy the box, save our friend, and escape. By the way, here's a nice detail. Remember how the first game began? Six woke up in a mysterious suitcase. Just behind the monstrous version of her, you can faintly see this same suitcase blatantly confirming that this took place right before the maw. So, in the most cinematic fight yet, you have to once again go through door portals and work your way around Six using callouts and an axe for the music box. You have such a tight window that you'd have better luck robbing a bank with your bare hands and getting away with it than hitting this fucking music box. Calling to her is sad in a way. Mono is trying really hard to break her from the binds of darkness, and the only way he can is to use his heart. This entire fight scene, while being very overwhelming, is also extremely sad. Imagine your best friend becomes a zombie, or some twisted version of themselves with little remnants of their past life inside somewhere. If I could count how many times she smushed or crushed or slammed me into the ground, it'd probably be 30. They surely saved the hardest part for last here, understandably so. We're fighting our best friend. It's all about the— fuck, I died again. Hold on, it's all about— fuck, okay, just hold on and let me— fuck! Alright, wait, oh wow, alright, this is a tough segment. After 10 goddamn days, I was able to break the music box for good and thankfully save Six from the corruption she was enduring. Suddenly, the entire complex becomes engulfed in what appears to be a massive flesh monster full of eyeballs. You're being glared at as you sprint away from the fucking thing, which is a terrifying idea. The two of you run like hell until the platform between collapses. Mono sprints and jumps as Six grabs his hand. For one brief moment, there's a sad theme being played. The thought had just popped into my head intrusively when, in that second, Mono releases his grip and dramatically falls into the depths with the all-consuming monster. I was emotional here, and felt a sincere amount of sadness for the brave little boy that I just spent 4.5 days playing as. After all the darkness he'd encountered, the hardships he endured, and the friends he tried to save, he ends up falling into the darkness and becoming the creature's newest infection. Mono is shown being transitioned into the next variation of a thin man, much like the one who chased you earlier. What the fuck is this, the movie Vivarium? I guess this could mean a number of things, but wow. It just makes me really sad. The theme here is that it's a lot darker than before. As is Little Nightmare's fashion, some questions are answered, but even more have spawned. The only unfortunate thing that I have to say is, now I have to wait until the third game to find out what the fuck is going on. Little Nightmares 2 is a fantastic sequel to an outstanding and promising series of artistic horror told in gaming. It's so haunting because it's not afraid to show even the most innocent of souls, such as children, that this warped version of the world is their reality, and they will never have control of it. If Six was able to escape thanks to her friend Mono, then where else could the story go? If we had a prequel, what's next? I've seen the teaser videos and pictures on the official Steam page for the third installment of the series. In my opinion, it looks really sweet and graphically pleasing, but I seriously hope it answers some of the stuff that I'm still wondering about. What the fuck was the Maw? What happened to all of the people who once inhabited this happy place? Why are Mono and Six the only kids who understand the horrors around them and are able to outwit them? Look, all of those things may never be answered, but on their own, Little Nightmares and its sequel deserve to be discussed on this channel because they're perfect horror stories that wrap themselves up nicely and neatly. Nothing is overblown or overdone, you get the exact right amount of time in each segment, and the gameplay speaks for itself. It's a masterpiece. My good friends, I thank you yet again for not only 1,600 subscribers, but for taking an interest in this video today. I'm extremely passionate about Little Nightmares, and playing this sequel for the first time during this review was a great time. Here's hoping the third game is just as good, if not better than that. I want it to be, I'm just nervous for some reason that I won't ever find out what's going on or where the story's gonna go from here. Anyway, no use ranting on any further. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.